Hey, deserving listeners, 9-Day Fiancé. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. This is the Psychology in Seattle YouTube channel. Keep in mind that everything I talk about might contain triggering material. Watch with care. Let's watch.
Another woman, you love him.
Kind of disappointed now.
Michael, was that you on the voice message, yes or no?
Yeah, that was me on the voice message, the voice notes.
Okay, so good question from Sean and an indication that it was Michael. It certainly sounded like him. So he's talking like he shouldn't be in trouble. So maybe Michael has a viable explanation as to what happened. And certainly it's hard to imagine.
Michael, who were you talking to?
Okay, there's this random lady.
She's a whore.
All this, I know I admitted my wrong. I caused it all, But for the fact that I did this.
Okay, I think what he's saying is that there's a random lady and I'm wrong and I shouldn't have flirted in that way, but it doesn't mean anything to me and I wasn't actually going to do anything with it. I think that's what he's saying. Is that what he meant?
Michael, who were you talking to?
Okay, there's this random lady.
She's a whore.
All this, I know I admitted my wrong. I caused it all, But for the fact that I did this, I love my wife, and nobody can come in between us.
Okay, so I think he's saying, yeah, that's me. I was cheating. Yeah, say what you will about Angela, but it would be completely understandable if Angela were to be skeptical of Michael at this moment. There would need to be so much more there, because to believe that the one time that he did this, he was caught, like in all likelihood, he's probably doing this and still doing it, right? So yeah, and he's cheated before. He has cheated before, and so has she. She's cheated with Billy emotionally. It looked like cheating to me in terms of emotional cheating. So, yeah. But that two wrongs don't make it right. And, interesting.
You guys just don't understand the whole scenario, okay?
That's some sneaky.
Michael, was the woman that you left the message for an American?
At first I'm thinking, well, what difference does that make? But then I think it lends itself to the theory that he's a scammer and that he is just looking for any American to scam, which, yeah, okay, we'll see what happens.
Michael, was the woman that you left the message for an American?
Yes. She's an American.
America? I was thinking from the beginning he was looking for that visa.
Okay, yeah, I don't know if that matters that much. Although I think it is a viable question for Michael as to whether or not he really has ever really loved Angela or not. And I've talked about that before. I don't like to think that kind of stuff, but of course it's possible for someone to be a scammer completely. But if I were to take a guess, I would say that he legit loves Angela or did at one point.
I don't like ignoring people,
That's bull.
That's not being polite.
I went too far about it, which I truly admitted my wrong. I know I up.
Angela, you said he left that message for this woman while he was with you?
Yes.
How do you know
I
that?
kicked her out because all the dates, the times.
Yes.
She sent it to a friend of mine.
So his whole explanation is that he effed up. Yeah, I'm sorry, I effed up, huh? That's not very reassuring, I'm guessing, to Angela.
Just imagine if your friend would not have sent these to you. This would have been going on
and I said
and
that,
on
Kirk,
and
he
on.
lies so bad he needs help.
Yeah, to me, if I were in Angela's shoes, which God help me if that were true, but if I were, I would be much more concerned with this than I would about his previous infidelity. He, the first time in that first season, talked about how before him and Angela were really a solid thing in my book, seemingly, he drove a woman home or something like that, and there was third base stuff, if you will. I don't know what's going to get me canceled on YouTube. I'm not shy about saying stuff like that, but I just don't want to get flagged on YouTube. But and I've heard horror stories of like whole channels being taken down because of minor issues like that. So I don't want to play around with that. But anyway, so for Michael, when he did that, if I were Angela, I would say that's pretty awful. But the way that it seemed, it was this one-off thing that was in the moment. It obviously could have been a much larger thing or a much bigger pattern of his. But the way it seemed, it was just like he had a temporary moment of weakness or something. And obviously that's pretty concerning. And if I were Angela, that would be very upsetting to me. But this bit of infidelity in my book is more concerning because he was emotionally pursuing people online. He was also very adamant about trying to keep his Instagram. So, yeah, I think that was legit, but it starts to maybe look less legit. And you also know that he has access to thousands of women who are, and American women who are trying to contact him. So, and he has no explanation as to why he did this or how he's working on it or what's going on. He's just like, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I take full responsibility. I made a mistake. I love you. That would be way more concerning. Because to me, what it says is without any responsibility, without any explanation, it's like, well, surely, because say he comes to the States with Angela, how often is Michael going to be around someone alone, a woman, who is going to be up for that kind of thing or is going to offer that or whatever? That's going to be pretty infrequent. But how often does he have his phone? He has his phone all the time. So I would be much more concerned about that. And the way he was talking, that's the other part of this, right? It's one thing to get together physically with someone. It's another thing to have said what he was saying. It's just like, yeah, I don't want to, give me some time. I can't remember exactly what he said, but something like, I love you, I miss you, I want to be with you, and that would be a lot more concerning.
Ask him how long when he put his Instagram up that they had this affair.
And not only concerning about the security of the relationship, does he really love me? Does he really want to be with me, whether he's scamming me or not? But also just an indication of his personality that he would do that sort of. Again, it's one thing, she's in the States, halfway across the world. Again, it's not great, but it is a much shorter leap for that to happen than for him to be actively pursuing someone online in the way that he was and leaving a voice note for someone. It indicates potentially, and there's no way to know, there's no real other indication of that, but it could be the tip of the iceberg of lack of empathy, actual scamming, that kind of thing.
He's so bad he needs help. Ask him how long when he put his Instagram up that they had this affair. 1 hour.
Well, that's interesting. They keep showing Kim and Usman as a comparison or a contrast, maybe. I don't know what they're saying with the editing, but that's interesting. Who knows if that's accurate, but if that is, yikes. So, yeah, that certainly lends itself. And I was saying this from the beginning, that Angela's accusation of him and trying to get rid of his Instagram and all of her emotion and abuse this entire season around that, which even if he was cheating, it doesn't justify, and I was saying at the time, it doesn't justify her being abusive like she was physically, emotionally, financially. And I was saying at the time, it's like, well, he could be cheating. There's no way to know. There's no data, and she's not presenting that. But now she has actual data that seemingly, as soon as he got access to Instagram back, and he was fighting for it, an hour later, he is sending that note to someone. So, yeah, that is, I mean, at the very least, it plays into her worries and her paranoias. And I just assume that if there were data to back up her worries this season, she would have said it. She would have presented it because she was grabbing at any ammunition she can. Now, sometimes people will get a vibe and they don't have any data, but they get a sense of something. There's instincts or little cues here and there. Sometimes that will indicate something going on. So in one sense, I'm actually just a little bothered that she was right the whole time. But that doesn't negate what I was saying throughout the season, because What I was saying was, without any data, you shouldn't be jumping to those conclusions, right? Even if those conclusions happen to be true, or at least might have been potentially true at some point. And certainly abusing him, even though you were assuming things and it happened to be right, abusing him absolutely is not justified. Just because someone is cheating on you gives you no right to abuse them. Absolutely.
So, Angela, here's the question. You found out that Michael was cheating on you. Are you and Michael together?
Yes.
Okay, so I think that she is willing to listen to him about this, that she believes. So she said something earlier that I didn't comment on, and because I was like, huh, but hearing this now, I think I know what she was saying, was that he has a problem, like a sex addiction, that kind of thing. And he might legit have some kind of issue that he has adequately explored and convinced her of, that I might even get behind. I don't know. You know, some people have compulsions that are like this. There is such a thing called compulsive sexual behavior and obsession. There's also other kinds of compulsions that people have. So maybe he legit has something like that, instead of being a scammer, instead of being someone who doesn't have empathy, instead of being someone who's prone to cheating. And she's convinced that he's going to work on that.
But I'm confused. I can't believe nothing he says now. I heard him tell another woman he loved her. I heard, he wrote a text that could get us in so much trouble.
Yeah, for the visa, right? I hadn't thought about that. I forgot that he said he loved her. Yeah, wow, yikes. And I'm surprised that she still wants to be with him. That's really surprising. I mean, given what we saw over the season, you would think when this happens that she would just be, yeah, I was willing to break up with him, divorce him on no data, and now that I have data, then absolutely. But it's kind of surprising.
Like, let me get to the States and I'll come to you. I'll handle Angie. He wrote that. Being a Nigerian, he knows better. He wrote that on paper, on text.
Yeah, that's pretty awful. Pretty damning evidence, and hard to imagine how Michael could have convinced Angela that he can be trusted, or that she should give him a second chance, because it sounds like she's given him a second chance.
You have seen a text
Yes.
that Michael wrote
Yes,
to
I've
another
seen a
woman
bunch.
saying, what? Just let me get to the States?
And that was after I got home and we were getting along, and when I'm asleep and he's on the phone, he'd be texting her while I'm in the bed.
Yeah, if that's true, we've seen this before. We believe we might have seen that from Muhammad and Eve. There were speculations about Muhammad and Danielle along these lines. It's not unheard of. We understand that happens sometimes. This show, I think, is partially fueled by that question mark. So are we seeing that right now? What do you think?
Michael, is that true?
Yes. But I wrote that down, but I never meant it. I told my wife, I said, I only wrote that down just to flirt with her, but I never meant it. I would never leave my wife for anything.
Yeah, I mean, all that could be true. I've seen things like this where people will flirt out of a mass. I remember Stephen and Alina. I remember speculating that because of insecurity, one of their defenses is to flirt as a way of trying to prove to themselves that they're attractive, prove to themselves that they're worth it. And there's a lot of people like that. Some of you have even emailed me and said, when I've described that condition, you're like, actually, I'm like that, or I used to be like that. It's obviously pretty self-destructive, but it's because of traumas and being made to feel worthless or unattractive or unworthy or something. Say, for example, you feel worthless, but you're really good as a long-distance runner. And so you become better and better at long-distance running, and you start to get attention and love and people praising you because you're really good as a long-distance runner. Well, there are individuals that will sacrifice a lot of themselves to become better and better at long-distance running as a way of trying to get a little bit of love and attention that they need. And they'll sacrifice a lot of other things, and they actually won't seek more direct avenues to attachment, which are relationships, intimacy, romance, friendship, this kind of thing, because they don't think that those things are possible. Well, another manifestation of that syndrome is to flirt. One might feel worthless and they're like, well, I am good at flirting, or there are people that want to flirt with me, and I'm having a dip in my self-esteem right now and my self-worth, and I know there's a fast track to self-worth, and I'm so desperate for that I'm willing to scam these flirtation relationships, even at the risk of alienating my wife, my partner. It's possible, but it's obviously also possible that he's a total scammer and a liar and a cheat and maybe even slightly psychopathic. There's a lot of things that are possible at this moment.
I know what we've been through
You ain't gotta
together.
leave me, because I'm getting ready to leave you, Michael.
I'm serious. I'm dead
too old for
serious.
this,
Yeah,
man. You're gonna give me a heart attack.
I am dead serious. But what it is I know what you've been through with me. I know what what you've done for me. I will never jeopardize that for anybody.
Michael.
I mean, that certainly doesn't help when he says something like that. He's what you've done for me. I mean, it sounds like he's saying you're giving me an opportunity. You're giving me the ability to come to the States. I'm never going to forget that. Thank you so much, Angela. It's like, well, I think that actually might support the accusation that he is just in the relationship with Angela because of the visa and the money.
Michael, how many different women have you talked to since you have been with
Who
Angela?
knows?
Michael?
I receive a lot of messages from them, but I don't really respond.
Yeah, this is my impression of Michael, that he isn't prone to lying when he knows it's not a good idea. And he just gets straight up asked by Sean, how many of these women? And he's saying, you see him get frustrated because another person, another sort of defensive structure in his shoes would just say, that's the only one. That's the only one. But he doesn't say that. He leans back. He's like, oh boy, here we go. He's like, well, a lot of women, they reach out to me and I don't really respond. Meaning I do respond probably to a lot of women. Now, he might be saying that one was in particular, that one was the worst of it. And the other women, it's not anything like that. It's mainly just kind of winky faces or something. And maybe they compliment me and my sexiness, and I look at their Instagram and I compliment them. And that's not good, but it's all part of the issue. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's talk about empowerment. When we feel empowered, we recognize our strengths. When we feel empowered and we experience adversity, we're more likely to see it as a welcome challenge rather than an overwhelming obstacle. And since we're social creatures, we often need help from others to feel empowered at times. We might need others to give us perspective. We might need others to recognize how we might be able to overcome the obstacle. And sometimes the people around us, they're really not that much help. I've been there before. When I went to therapy for the first time when I was 19 years old, it was primarily because none of my friends were very helpful in this area. Sometimes it's really great to talk with a therapist when you want to feel more empowered. Well, that's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp is convenient and flexible and affordable. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
I think like saying I love you is kind of heavy words to say to somebody. So you know what I mean? You don't say love you in one day. You say it like in time. So what do you throw words like that, Michael?
Now, I want to be clear. Infidelity is wrong. It's immoral. It's wrong. It's lying. It's and by definition, infidelity is only present if you have an agreement of exclusivity, or at least an implied agreement of exclusivity with your partner, or you're a polyamorous couple and you have rules about when and who you can be with other people. So there is cheating and infidelity within polyamorous and even open relationships. So infidelity is wrong. It's destructive. It's harmful. There's so many other ways around it. There's so many ways to avoid it. There's so many ways to admit it. You have a dalliance and you're like, ooh, and you go to your partner and say, I got to tell you, I've been having this issue lately and I flirted with someone. I'm sorry. You can come, or you could break up. You could say, clearly there's something going on here with me, and I shouldn't be with Angela because I'm flirting with these other people, and I've tried to not flirt with these other people, and it's not working. So I need to just end the relationship with Angela because I can't continue to do both. It's wrong. It's immoral. It's deceptive. It's harmful. In the vast majority of cases, the individual absolutely knows that they are putting things at risk. They're putting the other person's heart at risk. They are risking harming the other person. At the very least, they're undermining the relationship, which is a harm to the other individual. So I don't want to come across like I'm overlooking that, because it is wrong. It's wrong. It's immoral. It's wrong. It's like pushing someone down a flight of stairs for no reason. It's just wrong.
That's kind of up he did.
Yeah, I know. I messed up. I'm sorry.
Michael, but tell me something, how are you with your wife and then sending text?
Yeah, Sean's asking great questions, by the way. I wouldn't have thought to ask this question, but this really cuts to the heart of the matter of just like, okay, fine, you're saying that you're sorry and that you take full responsibility, but how in the world do you send something like that when you're literally with your wife in that moment? Like, how does that make any sense?
Text messages to other women while you're with your wife. How do you do that?
Yeah.
Oh, poor me.
All I could say now is just, I am sorry.
He says, I feel so bad. Yeah, I don't know. So he could be lying here. You would be stupid not to add that to the considerations. He comes across as a pretty sincere guy when he apologizes for this sort of thing, though. You know, like when Steven and Alina, you see Steven's shadiness, you see Ed's shadiness. Michael doesn't come across that way, but he might be so shady that he comes across as not shady, right? He's so comfortable with lying that it looks like the truth. I don't know. I'd be really curious if I could just sit down with him and explore this whole thing, because there's a possibility that he absolutely recognizes that he has a problem and that he has a way of working on it. He's like, yeah, I got a problem. There's this. It's not anyone else's fault. It's my fault. I learned it from my dad or something. You know, there's a possibility that behind all this stuff is someone that I would say, oh, okay. And maybe Angela has seen that.
Michael, come out!
What is the meaning of this?
You bitch.
What meaning of
Bitch. Your ass up.
Well, I actually forgot how violent she was in this moment. Let's see what she says here. I actually can imagine that she would admit that this was wrong. So let's see what she says.
I'm done. Get out.
Angela, let's go.
At this moment, the only point she's proving is that our marriage is over.
You got pictures in your phone. You're scared.
bitches, stop it.
Let me see. I want to see everything. Nobody's protected their phone.
I must have said this at some point, but I've seen this before, and there's no real data for this, but it is a possible example of it, which is that you will have an abusive part. So you have two people. You have an abusive partner that you can see very clearly is abusive, and then you have the victim, and the way that they get back at the abusive partner is to be passive in their aggression, to be hidden in their hostility, to be to have their anger go around the bush. And one of the ways you can do that is to cheat on this person. And so this person will actually be cheating behind the scenes and getting some satisfaction as if they're setting the scales of balance correct. You know, it's like they're being victimized, and then this person's like, they're obviously justifiably angry and hurt and upset, but they can't actually go to them directly because they're worried that they're going to get abused more. And so they will do other things at getting back. One of the ways you can do it is through cheating. It can feel like, yeah, I mean, you can't control me all the time, or this is going to hurt your feelings, and you're going to feel as hurt as I feel when you abuse me. The other thing that will happen, it's not this situation, obviously, because she is being abusive to him, is that sometimes this person is not being abusive, but this person, because they were abused in the past, this is how they communicate all of their anger, is hidden ways, and they will cheat as a way of trying to communicate their anger, even though this person is at least somewhat, if not mostly receptive to direct anger. You know, if this passive person were to be angry, this person would accept it, and they wouldn't abuse this person. But this person assumes that will happen, or is in a pattern of assuming that. And these subconscious or maybe even conscious ways of communicating their anger manifest through cheating. Other manifestations of this are breaking privacy. They're like, for example, I had a client once who had this passive aggressive personality and would break into people's homes, would break into people's computers. She figured out how to hack into her professor's computer because she, as a student, was hurt and angry at her professor and felt overpowered. And even though her professor wasn't abusive to her, she felt like she needed some satisfaction, and she became really obsessed with breaking into the computer. And at least my conceptualization was it was because of this pattern of expressing anger through hidden ways. We might be seeing a pattern like that. It doesn't justify her abuse, but it could explain this scenario that they're in. And it certainly doesn't justify his behavior. Just because she's being abusive doesn't mean that he is off the hook, meaning that some people would say, well, he's cheating because she's abusive. And, sometimes that will happen. You'll see someone who's being abused and you'll hear about their infidelity and you're like, well, but I don't think we're in that situation. A situation that I would be more conducive to, at least on a moral stance, is that you're being abused, and you want out of the relationship. You don't want to be in the relationship because you're being abused, but you're terrified of leaving, or you can't leave for various different reasons, and you're sort of forced to stay with this person, and you have no love for your abuser. You have no attachment to them. You're just putting up with them. And then someone comes along and you meet that person, and then you bond with that person, and this person is safe, and this person, or at the very least, it's a respite from the abuse. And prior to breaking up, because you're not safe to, you actually will have a relationship with the second person, and technically it is infidelity, but the way I described it, it's not, you wouldn't blame the victim for doing that under those circumstances, you know what I mean? So there are situations where infidelity, I would not say, in my book, is an immoral act. Now, some people will feel like they're in a situation like that when they're really not, and they will justify to themselves, well, I'm not safe to leave that person, or some sort of excuse which allows me to cheat, so it depends, obviously.
Unless you got something to hide, especially from their wife.
Angela, do you regret any of your actions?
Nope.
Not at all?
Yeah, okay. Well, I thought, because she has apologized and she has admitted that she has issues, and maybe she would under different circumstances if she weren't in the midst of them talking about the infidelity. I think she's hurt and upset right now, so maybe she would be able to. But it's also not surprising that she would say that, because she has a consistent pattern of being abusive towards him.
Why not?
I knew it.
Right, so you hear that justification, that for her, she's saying, I knew he was cheating, and so it's okay that I was violent with him. And that points a lot towards what I've been hypothesizing, that she grew up with a lot of violence in her childhood. When you see that amount of violence, your gauge as to what is normal gets very skewed, where you're like, well, because all of us would agree, I imagine most of us would agree, that under some circumstances, it is justified to be violent. Maybe not with your spouse or your family members, but someone attacks your child and is trying to drag your child off. You might be violent, or a dog starts to bite your child. You have license and a responsibility to be violent with that animal. Or, there are situations where we consider it to be justified. There's a range, even if we're raised relatively well, there's a range of like where it's, or someone gets in your face and start, I think I said last week that when Angela went up to Yara and was towering over her and screaming at her, and I think in a very threatening stance, that if I were Jovi, I would have stood up and pushed her back. I would have stood up and said, stand back or I'm going to push you, or something like that. And I think that would have been justified. You can't just tower over someone like that and yell and scream and put your finger in their face without, you're justified in saying, stand back, you are threatening me, get back, or else something's going to happen. I'm not going to let you do that to my loved one. Now, I think it was a good idea that Jovi didn't do anything because Angela just ended up walking out. So it was a good move that Jovi just waited to make sure nothing happened. Because I don't think anyone thought rationally that Angela was going to take a swing at Yara or something like that. So there are times when it is justified. Well, if as a child you experience violence at in all sorts of situations, then you encode that morality and that range of just like, well, yeah, if someone's annoying you, you smack them. If someone's cheating on you, yeah, I mean, you're passionate, you're upset, and you're, of course, justified in putting hands on. I didn't kill him. I didn't shoot him with a gun. I just got in his face and grabbed him. If that's what you do when if I were my parents, I would have maybe even almost killed him. I would have beat him to a pulp. I didn't do anything like that. I mean, I was way less. So you can imagine someone with that background having a distorted sense of what the range is in terms of what's justified and what's fair.
Michael's never treated me like that. Like, when I arrived, did you hear what he said? What am I doing coming there unannounced? I'm your wife.
Yeah,
I want to
you have
call
every
you.
right
I was
to
going to
show up.
surprise you.
Yeah.
I feel embarrassed. Angela is Michael's wife. She can make a surprise visit anytime. If you are being loyal to your wife, I don't see why you should be complaining about.
Is no one going to ignore the manner in which if she showed up with flowers and chocolates and said, I love you, a surprise, I'm just going to take a guess and say that Michael would have reacted a little differently. He opens the door. Well, first, she's tearing apart his car. She's screaming to the neighborhood that she's there. She's banging on the door, demanding he come out. He comes out. She takes a swing at him and puts hands on. So I think he was saying, you come unannounced. I think that's his way of just expressing, like, you just show up here and you just, So now there's another possibility that he was up to shady stuff, and that's why he was upset and surprised and angry.
I think Ed can run his mouth, but he can't handle taking the heat when it comes to him.
Michael has got a lying problem, I'm telling y'all.
No.
He don't know how to tell the truth.
Some people did, too. Let's check now. Instagram.
Okay, interesting. So Angela says Michael has a lying problem. I wonder if their conceptualization, Michael and Angela, if it would make sense to me. I'm guessing it wouldn't, but it sounds like behind the scenes, independently or together, they've come up with some kind of conceptualization that gives them hope for the future, that he has this compulsive lying issue. It seems at the very least that's an issue, but I think the issues could be much greater. Because it's one thing to be a compulsive liar. It's another thing to pursue. I don't think I showed all the data, but they were saying that in that phone call that he called this other American woman, he was saying that just wait until I get my visa, I'll come to the States, and then I'll dump Angela and I'll be with you. Would you do that if you were just sort of in a innocuous way flirting with someone online? Would you say something like that? I mean, I suppose maybe that's another part of the pathological lying. He's lying to someone. He's either lying to the woman, this other woman, or he's lying to Angela.
Hey, what was his Instagram name before? Do you remember?
It's Mr. Michael.
Mr. Michael, okay.
Mr. Nothing.
This is my official account. I love my wife, Angela. Okay.
It's going to be anybody who
That's good.
the whole.
Yeah, there's enough people on the internet, and I'm glad Yara points it out. I don't think Angela knows this, but the amount of people will imposter me. They will pose as me. So by the way, if you ever see that, please let me know, because it's one thing for a YouTuber or a podcaster to have an imposter. It's another thing to have, I'm a clinician. These individuals could cause a lot of problems, not only for people in the public, but potentially my clients, my students. If they're convinced that this person is real, they obviously could cause a lot of problem to my to my business. So please let me know. The best way, the most sure way to contact me is through the website. There's a link below that goes straight to the form that you just fill out. Just, just a couple seconds. Just be like, by the way, you don't even have to, you just say, hey, there's an imposter on YouTube that has this name, look into it. And people will do that. And it's always very helpful to have that information. And YouTube and other places are pretty good about dealing with that. Yara is like, look, that could be anybody. And Jovi's like, no, it looks convincing because it says that, look, I love my wife and everything. And yeah, a smart imposter would include those kinds of things to make it more convincing.
Wait a minute, where'd they get this picture at?
That's what I'm saying.
Where'd that picture come from?
Somebody said it was real. So I don't know.
Where did
anybody can do that, you know? Okay. Any crazy
But then again, this is how my mind is. Or is he that smart to make me think it ain't him?
Now, it could be him. He could be lying. He could be, that could be his account. So who knows? All right, well, that does it for that episode in which I react to the tell-all, no limits. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.